about what happened back in 2001, why you're so deeply concerned about the new vice president of Afghanistan, Dostum.
Yes, well, a large group of fighters, mostly Taliban, surrendered to General Dostum's Northern Alliance, which was working as an ally of the United States at a time when, indeed, U.S. Special Forces, as you mentioned, were on the ground. And these surrendered prisoners were loaded like sardines into trucks, according to a lot of testimony and evidence that we have, and transported across the desert, many of them suffocated probably within days because they were not given water. They were locked up in these essentially coffins, packed in. We have reports of shots being fired into the trucks, possibly to create air holes, but indeed the way in which they were fired indicates that they were fired straight into the trucks, so killing some of the surrendered prisoners. And then, reportedly, they were all brought across to this area now known as Dashti Leli, near the Shebra prison. Physicians for Human Rights sort of came upon this site when we were visiting the horrific conditions, or discovered the horrific conditions in Shebra, which is near the northern capital of Mazar-e-Sharif, northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan. And we found that prisoners in Shebra were dying dozens a day for lack of food, illness, horrible sanitation. And we noticed that there were bodies on the surface, or remains, bones, etc. And within a month or two, under United Nations auspices, we did a mapping of this grave and went back and exhumed a number of bodies, and indeed documented that the deaths were consistent with suffocation. And it appears that U.S. Forces were certainly cognizant of these deaths. We know this because Physicians for Human Rights actually filed a Freedom of Information Act query in 2006, and eventually we had to sue to get the information. And when it came out, we have reports from U.S. officials that indeed they knew that as many as 2,000 surrendered prisoners had died in this, what we call a convoy of death, and also that witnesses were reportedly tortured and executed, eyewitnesses to these crimes. And we've been advocating for a full-out investigation by the international community and by the United States, and of course by the Afghan government itself, ever since. Now it's 12 years and counting, and we still do not know what really happened at Dashti Leli.
It now seems clear that the Bush administration resisted efforts to pursue investigations of an Afghan warlord named General Dostum, who was on the CIA payroll. It's now come out there were hundreds of Taliban prisoners under his care who got killed. Right. Some were suffocated in a steel container, others were shot, possibly buried in mass graves. Would you call for an investigation into possible war crimes in Afghanistan?
Yeah, the indications that this had not been properly investigated just recently was brought to my attention. So what I've asked my national security team to do is to collect the facts for me that are known, and we'll probably make a decision in terms of how to approach it once we have all the facts gathered up.
But you wouldn't resist categorically an investigation?
I think that there are responsibilities that all nations have, even in war. And if it appears that our conduct in some way supported violations of the laws of war, then I think that we have to know about that.
That was President Obama on CNN in 2009, actually, interestingly, in Ghana. Jamie Duran, you have been following this story for well over a decade. What about President Obama's response and what's happened since? You were just recently in Afghanistan, and your response to Dostum, the general, becoming the vice president of the country.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of a picture of Afghan politics, that you can have a man, as you said at the very beginning of your program, where the president, the new president, described him as a murderer, and then appoints him as his vice president simply for pragmatism purposes to get 13% of the vote. The Uzbeks represent 13% of the entire electorate. Dostum leads the Uzbeks. Afghani needed Dostum by his side in order to win that election.
Jamie Durant, when we had Jim Risen on our show, he was skeptical that U.S. Special Forces were involved in this massacre. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, you probably don't know this, but I actually gave Jim Risen the FBI contacts that led to his story in his front page news. So, you know, let's clear that up right away. And the FBI agent was, in fact, a man called Del Spry, an extraordinary man who reported his findings from Guantanamo to his bosses in Washington. He was told, don't, you know, get away from that. Don't continue investigations. Don't file any report. Del refused to buckle, if you like, and insisted on filing yet another report, even under threat from his superiors. I think it's been a great shame that Obama, we thought, you know, we understood Bush would want to hide as much as possible. We thought Obama might be a fresh broom. It's not been the case. He too has not got involved. He's not pushed it in any way. Dostum is now the vice president of a country. It's quite bizarre. You know, I don't know if you're aware that Dostum actually apologized for his war crimes last year in the run-up to the election. Again, an example of pragmatism. He apologized but wasn't specific. He just tried to give a kind of general apology for all the terrible things he'd done. And the Afghan people seem to have bought that.